Imagine your mind is not a closed room, but an open terrace. And at some point, a guest appears on that terrace. They bring knowledge you never possessed, speak languages you never learned, and see the world from a vantage point inaccessible to an ordinary person. Who speaks when we are silent? Is our consciousness the sole master of its own house? Or are we merely biological radio receivers capable of tuning into the frequencies of other worlds, eras, and levels of mind? From conversations with the divine to complex medical diagnoses delivered in a state of deep sleep. From automatic writing to entire philosophical systems dictated out of the void. Today, we look behind the scenes of one of the most mysterious phenomena of the human psyche, channeling. This is a continuation of our series on exceptional human experiences. If, in our last video, we learned to see the hidden through clairvoyance, today, we will explore what it's like to become a living channel for that which lies beyond human understanding. But how exactly does this mechanism work? If we set aside skepticism for a moment, we find that science and metaphysics offer at least 3 fundamental models that explain where the information in the channel comes from. 1. The psychological model, the deep self. The first theory claims the source is not outside, but within. From this perspective, channeling is a form of productive dissociation. Our unconscious is a colossal archive, housing not only our forgotten memories, but also layers of the collective unconscious, Jung's archetypes. In a trance state, the ego steps aside, allowing hidden parts of the psyche to synthesize information and project it as an autonomous voice. Here, channeling is the ultimate unfolding of the human brain's internal potential. 2. The physiobiological model, the quantum receiver. The second model views our brain not as a producer of consciousness, but as its transmitter. This is the reduction valve theory. Imagine that, in an ordinary state, the brain acts as a filter, blocking 99% of information so we can focus on survival. But in moments of channeling, the filter's settings change. Neurophysiologists record bursts of gamma waves during this time. The brain enters a mode of superconductivity, tuning into a non-local information field. Here, information is not a fantasy, but a signal caught from the cloud storage of the universe. 3. The metaphysical model, the vertical channel. Finally, the view held by practitioners themselves. This is a model of conscious collaboration. According to it, consciousness is not limited by the body and exists at different frequencies. Channeling in this system is a vertical connection with hierarchies of mind that exist beyond our dimension. It is not just data retrieval, but a temporary rental of a person's vocal apparatus by another personality or entity to deliver specific messages. Why do some people become open channels while others never encounter such experiences? Research in the field of exceptional human experiences shows that channeling is not so much a gift as a unique configuration of the psyche in which 3 key factors converge. First is the cognitive foundation. People predisposed to channeling possess a high degree of openness to experience and a capacity for deep absorption. This is the ability to become so intensely immersed in an idea, a book, or a state of being that the outside world literally ceases to exist. For such individuals, the boundaries between the self and the not-self are naturally more permeable, allowing external information to flow into their consciousness without resistance. The second factor is biological readiness. This involves a specific kind of neuroplasticity and a developed skill for hemispheric synchronization. Channeling requires the brain to work with surgical precision. The right hemisphere must receive abstract images and meanings, while the left hemisphere must translate them into intelligible words instantaneously, without distorting their essence. It is a kind of dual-core mode of consciousness, often trained through years of meditation or deep creative practice. And finally, the existential request. Many famous cases of channeling began not with meditation, but with a crisis. Intention, or a powerful internal surge, is what switches on the receiver. When a person finds themselves at a dead end, when their logical mind is exhausted, the psyche can perform a quantum leap, hacking its own limitations to retrieve an answer from a broader information field. To understand how this looks in practice, we could divide channeling into 3 levels, depending on how deeply the author's consciousness yields to the flow. 1. The conscious dialogue. Let's start with a classic, the Seth materials. Jane Roberts was a translator. During sessions, she would enter a trance, but often remained conscious, describing it as a process where she heard blocks of thought and clothed them in words. This is an example of a light trance, where the author's personality does not disappear but works alongside the source. Here, the risk of distortion is highest, yet the information is most accessible for human understanding. 2. The motor channel. Brazilian medium Chico Xavier is a phenomenon of automatic writing. His hand lived a life of its own, transcribing hundreds of books at incredible speed, sometimes in languages he did not know. This is an example of partial replacement. While his body worked as a printer, Chico himself could continue a conversation or remain in a state of light detachment. Here, the impulse goes directly to the motor cortex, bypassing the brain's analytical filter. 3. Total exit. Finally, the deepest level, the sleeping prophet, Edgar Cayce. This is a deep trance in which consciousness completely leaves the stage. Cayce would fall asleep, and complex medical and philosophical knowledge would be transmitted through him. Upon waking, he did not remember a single word of what was said. This state is considered the point of the purest transmission, as the practitioner's ego is entirely offline and cannot impose its own filters on the information. When discussing channeling, it is impossible to ignore the question, where does an expanded state of consciousness end and a mental disorder begin? Outwardly, channeling in clinical conditions like schizophrenia can look identical. In both cases, a person hears voices or feels control from the outside. But if we look closer, we find fundamental differences. First is the preservation of the personality. For a channeler, a trance is a temporary, manageable, and importantly, voluntary process. Outside of the session, they are a completely functional, socially active person. In a mental disorder, voices intrude into life chaotically. They're not subject to control and gradually erode the personality, detaching it from reality. Second is the quality of the information. Channeling usually carries a constructive, structured, and often highly intellectual meaning. Recall Edgar Cayce. The information he transmitted helped heal people and contained facts that were later verified. In pathology, the flow of thoughts is most often destructive, fragmentary, and carries no value for others. It is the noise of the system, not a signal. Third is the attitude toward the experience. Channelers often maintain critical thinking. They investigate their gift, doubt it, and analyze it. A patient, however, is often deprived of this critique. They drown in the flow, unable to distance themselves from it. However, we must admit, the line is indeed very thin. History knows cases where a deep mystical experience was mistaken for illness simply because the person lacked the tools to understand and integrate what was happening. Channeling is a constructive dissociation that expands the boundaries of our self, while illness is a fragmentation that destroys those boundaries. Channeling forces us to face a most uncomfortable question: where does our self truly end? If we can be conduits for ideas, knowledge, and personalities that transcend our own experience, then perhaps consciousness is not an isolated island, but part of a boundless ocean. Whether channeling is a higher form of intuition, a hack of the universe's cloud storage, or actual contact with another intelligence, everyone decides for themselves. But one thing is indisputable. This experience expands the boundaries of human potential, showing that we are capable of much more than just survival in a three-dimensional world. Is it possible that the guest on our terrace is simply another part of ourselves that we haven't met yet? The study of exceptional human experiences continues to remind us that the map of the mind still has many blank spots. Explore the depths of your consciousness and do not be afraid to look beyond the edge of the familiar. See you next time.